Good afternoon, my dear students and friends. Myself, Dr. Ravikant Pathak, and I'm going to start your video lecture class. In the last video lecture, we have studied about the mechanism of breathing, and now today we will talk about the next topic of this chapter, that is the transport of gases and respiratory pigment. So we are going to discuss first of all about the respiratory pigment. So here you can say respiratory pigment. We have to see in different like blue and red color. So red color hemoglobin and blue color, that is the hemocyanin we can see here. Hemocyanin, that is this is the copper containing molecules. If you see, this is the copper containing molecules. And how it will produce the blue color, because copper first, this is the first oxidation, and here copper second, this is the second oxidation. When oxygen bind with the copper first, there is the oxidation takes place. After that, they will give the blue color. So there they have given the Kaj's color change between colorless to blue. And these hemocyanins carry oxygen. These have ability to, because this is the respiratory pigment, and respiratory pigment molecules, they have ability to bind with the oxygen molecules. So here they have given, it is the metalloprotein containing two copper atoms that reversibly bind a single oxygen molecule. We have to see in case of the hemoglobin bind four oxygen molecules, but here hemocyanin bind with the single oxygen molecule. Where it is found in the phylum Mollusca and some arthropods, like example Limulus polyphemus. Their common name is the horseshoe crab. So their scientific name, common name is the horseshoe crab. Now here you can see, and most hemocyanin bind with the oxygen non-cooperatively. It means there is no cooperative. We have to see in case of the hemoglobin, there is the cooperative binding. What means of the cooperative binding? Cooperative binding means when the oxygen molecules come together with the, because hemoglobin is the enzyme. This is the quaternary structure of the protein. They behave such enzyme. When the oxygen molecules bind with their active site, so their binding affinity also increases. This is called the cooperativity. This is called the cooperativity. But this is not happened in case of the hemocyanins. In case of the hemocyanins, there is the oxygen non-cooperative and roughly one-fourth as efficient as hemoglobin at transporting oxygen per amount of the blood. Means, and it also roughly one-fourth efficient binding as the hemoglobin transfer to oxygen blood. Okay, so this means here non-cooperative binding takes place with the hemoglobin and hemocyanin with the oxygen molecules. Now we have to see about the hemocyanin. Next you can see, this is that they have given the tabular form different pigments and their role, their example, which have their metals. So first hemoglobin, we will discuss the detail about the hemoglobin in next class. So hemoglobin, it is the iron containing pigment. So this is the red in color, and why they give the related color? Because oxidation, when the oxidation takes place, they give the red color. Here they have the iron metal, and it is found in the chordata, that is the vertebrata, earthworm, Nereis, Arnicolac, Carinomas. So these have the hemoglobin as a pigment. Hemocyanin we have to see in the last slide. So hemocyanin, they have the blue color on the oxidation, and it have the copper metal, and here mollusca and arthropoda. So one, that is the horseshoe crab, which have the such type of the pigment. Now we can see erythro. So here they have given the erythrocruonin. Erythrocruonin. It is the also red color containing iron, and it is found in the leech. And hemoerythrin. This is also red color, iron containing metal. Annelida, Cypnocolloidea, and Lingula. So this is found. Chlorocruorin, it is the green color, very important. Chlorocruorin, it is the green color, and these have the iron metal also, and it is found in the Annelida, Sabella, and Serpulates. Now next is the Echinodermata. This is also phylum, and these have the red color iron present, and it is found in the Echinodermata. Vanadium. This is the vanadium. It is, you can say, this is the pigment, and which color? That is the green color. And they have the metal vanadium. It is found in the Urochordata. We have to see in Hemichordata as the separate phylum, but Urochordata and Cephalochordata, they includes in the in different division in case of the phylum vertebrata. That means phylum chordata. Sorry, phylum chordata. Now they have also given the pinnaglobin or pinnoglobin. It is the brown color and it is have the manganese and elements. Okay, these are the manganese as elements that is found in the pinna. Now next is the moledin. It is the brown in color and they have the molybdenum and it is found in the holothuria. So we have to see large number of the different pigments. They have the different color. But you should to learn about the hemocyanin and hemoglobin. So these are the two very important. These are the two very important which I already asked number of times in your NEET exam. So now we will start next thing, that means breathing rate. If you say I had already told about the human breathing rate, that is the 15 to, or simply you can say respiratory cycle 15 to 16 times, so 16 per minute. So the breathing rate of the human adult, that is the 15 to 16, they have given from 15 to 18 per minute. And a newborn baby, they perform the very rapid respiration, that means respiratory cycle is the very fast, here 40 to 50 times per minute. 5 years child, they have the 25, means slowly it gradually, you can say gradually it is reducing. After 50 years old, sudden increases, means if you see here 50 years old, there is also increasing. Rabbit, their respiratory cycle is 36 to 38. And one thing I had already told about the tortoise. So tortoise, there is the very slow respiratory rate. That means their respiratory cycle is the very slow, and due to this, they have the maximum lifespan. So their lifespan is the very much in animal kingdom. So tortoise have the maximum lifespan because their respiratory cycle is the very slow. Now next is the respiratory quotient. So respiratory quotient, it is the ratio of volume of CO2. Means how many CO2 we have to, means we have to exhaust. The volume of CO2 oblique, that means oblique or upon. The volume of CO2 upon oxygen used in the unit time, that is called the RQ. Okay, this is you can say respiratory quotient. And it varies for different substance used for. If you see in case of the acid, so oxalic acid, they have the maximum value. Oxalic acid, they have the maximum value 4.0. Least value for the fat. Fat have the max least value 0.7%. Then protein have the 0.85. So or simply you can say 0.9. And then carbohydrate, because we have to see in one example glucose molecules. So C6H12O6, and they release the they also inject the oxygen molecules. So 6 means 6 upon 6 you will get the 1. So carbohydrate always 1, and fat have the 0.7, protein 0.9, and organic acid they have the much, means maximum respiratory quotient. Okay, and in anaerobic respiratory quotient is the infinite, because they are not getting the proper oxygen, and you know if the value is 0, it means you can say this value will be go up to the infinite. And this how you can measure it, can be measured with the means of the Gannon's respirometer. So this can be measured by the Gannon's respirometer. So this is the respiratory quotient value, and with the help of respiratory quotients we can assume so which substrate utilized for the respiration purposes. Means with the help of with the help of RQ value, we can find out which substrate we have to utilize for the respiration purposes. Now next is the very important topic of this chapter, and this you should to focus, because this is the hub of your chapter, is breathing and exchange of gases. So transport of the gases is the very important. So now we will see here transport of the gases, they involve the 3 different steps. Okay, first is the external respiration, second is the internal respiration, and third is the cellular respiration. So these 3 steps involved. Here you can say transport of the respiratory oxygen and CO2 gases takes place in the following events. So here they have been the 3 different events. Now we will see the first, external respiration. What is the external respiration? Means we can say simply when the air enter into the alveoli, means lungs, and the pulmonary artery, means pulmonary veins, pulmonary artery, they carry the impure blood and open into the their respective alveoli, means left and right. Now this pulmonary artery, you can say pulmonary capillaries. So these have the means there is the much concentration of CO2, and less concentration of the oxygen, means partial pressure of the oxygen molecules is the there less, and much concentration, much partial pressure of the CO2 molecule. It will reach into the left and right alveoli. After that, gaseous exchange, means this is the external. So what you can say here, it includes the respiratory process which takes place in the lungs. External respiration means this is takes place in the lungs. And oxygen from the lungs, because we know in from atmospheric they have the partial pressure of the oxygen value is the 159. When it will reach into the lungs, so then their value is the 104 partial pressure of the oxygen molecules. It means 159 and reach up to the alveoli, it will reduce, means that respiratory passes or respiratory tract, they used some oxygen molecules. Now you can see oxygen from the lung diffuse in the lung capillaries. Oxygen from the lung diffuse in the lung capillaries, and CO2 from the lung capillaries diffuses into the lung. So this is called the external respiration. It means simply you can say pulmonary capillaries means pulmonary artery, because we have to know very well every artery and veins always carry pure and impure blood. But pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein, it is the exception for that. So here external respiration includes the three events. First is the exchange of gases, and there is the formation of oxyhemoglobin, and third is the release of the CO2. It means they involve three steps. First is the exchange of gases, and there is the formation of the hemoglobin HbO2, and here the release of the CO2. So these three steps involved. So now we will see the first step, that is the exchange of gases. So here you can see. Okay, so first each of when exchange of the gases. So we have already seen. That means exchange of gases. I had already told. Exchange of gases. I had already told. That means CO2 and oxygen. CO2 and oxygen. There is the changes takes place. So second is the formation of the oxyhemoglobin. Here you can see. So formation of the oxyhemoglobin, this is the very important steps, and here you can see the absorbed oxygen combines with the hemoglobin RBC. Okay, so the absorbed oxygen combines with the hemoglobin oxygen molecules, and here you can say hemoglobin RBC. Hemoglobin is the respiratory protein pigment. It forms the unstable molecules. Oxyhemoglobin, hemoglobin plus oxygen, oxygen plus the. You should to know one hemoglobin. I had already told about that in the previous slide, means last previous slide on the hemocyanin compared to the hemoglobin. So hemocyanin bind with the only one oxygen molecules, but one hemoglobin molecules bind with the four oxygen molecules. So now here they again, this is the hemoglobin molecules, and this is the four oxygen molecules. They will bind and they form the oxyhemoglobin complex. Okay, so I had already told, in case of the lungs there is the much oxygen, and in case of the tissue, so there is the low oxygen due to the pressure gradient, due to the pressure gradient of the these gases. So there is the gaseous exchange takes place between the alveoli and the pulmonary capillaries, between alveoli and pulmonary capillaries. Okay, so these things only happen. Now here you can say they have been the 50 gram of hemoglobin present in the 100 ml blood. So we have to seen already during the case of anemia, or you have to tested your blood. After that you got your results. So there is the 15 to 16, means from 14 to 15 hemoglobin. This is the 100 ml, means 15 gram hemoglobin. Means this is considered as a standard. 15 gram or 14 to 15 gram hemoglobin present in the blood. Means 1 gram of hemoglobin carry 1.34 molecules of the 34 ml of the oxygen. Thus, 100 ml of blood, 15 gram of MHG, sorry, 15 gram of hemoglobin can carry approx 20 ml of oxygen molecule. Means 100 ml blood, they have the two things. 100 ml blood have the two things. First is the hemoglobin. So hemoglobin content is the 14 to 15 gram. How many gram? 15 gram. Clear? And another is the carry how many oxygen molecules they are bind. So 20 ml oxygen molecules can bind with them. Okay, 20 ml. So these have given about the formation of the oxyhemoglobin component. Now next we can see release of the CO2. This is the third steps. How? Because we know very well. So there is the gaseous difference, means partial gradient, or simply you can say gaseous gradient form, and due to the gaseous exchange takes place. So now here you can see, so first of all, carbon dioxide from the blood is released outside into the air. We know very well. So suppose that this is the blood capillaries. Blood capillaries, pulmonary artery, and this is your lungs. So this is your lungs. Okay. And now we will also discuss the later. After that, one figure will come in which clarify details. So how many percent of the transport of the CO2 takes place? How many percent, means where it transport, means like you can say oxygen 97% transport in the form of hemoglobin, 3% in the blood plasma. And in case of the RBC, so 70% 70% transport in the form of bicarbonate ion, and 27% in the form of hemoglobin, means bind with the hemoglobin, and 3%, so 3% with the blood plasma. So we will see we will see later, but you should to know here they again. So CO2 is brought by the blood from the tissue cells. CO2 brought by the blood from the tissue cells and in the form of sodium and potassium bicarbonates in the blood plasma. I had already told. So this CO2 into the tissue cells through the sodium potassium bicarbonate, means maximum 70% blood transport in the form of bicarbonate. If you are not understanding, so we can see in the next slide, then you can easily understand. So if you see in the next slide, so here it have given, you can see here, that means 70% transporting in the form of H2CO3, means bicarbonate. So that's why I'm saying here in the previous slides, I'm saying like that. So that means most they have given that it is CO2 is brought about by the blood from the tissue cells in the form of sodium and potassium bicarbonate in the blood plasma. In the blood plasma they transport. Okay. And some amount of CO2 is also brought about by the hemoglobin. I had already told 23% bind with the hemoglobin CO2 molecules and they release. So hemoglobin in the form of carba-aminohemoglobin. This is also called the carba-aminohemoglobin. CO2 brought in all these forms is released. Where it released? It released into the alveoli, and alveoli through the exhalation remove outside the body. And here they have given the one enzyme which is known as the fastest enzyme, carbonic anhydrase. They have ability to conversion of the H2 plus CO2 formation of the H2CO3. Clear? So there is the carbonic anhydrase molecules. There is the means CO2 and water molecules involves. There is the formation of carbonic acid H2CO3. This is the fastest enzyme. And now this H2CO3 they further break down into the bicarbonate and proton. So they are released, and chloride, there is chloride enters into from blood plasma into the RBC cells. So same thing also here, this have given about the alveolus. This is alveolus, and here this is for the carbonic anhydrase, and from alveoli to tissue. This is given for the tissue. Clear? So that means there it is representing carbon dioxide changes between the alveoli and blood capillaries, then blood capillaries to tissue. So these have given. Now we can see next figure. If you see, so that is clearly explained. That figure clearly explained, and you should to try to understand what I am saying, because this is the clearly explained. No nothing. So you can say this is the simply explaining. Now here first of all see. That means wait 1 second, just yes. Now here we know very well. So it is showing the figure right atrium, and this is showing the left atrium, and we know very well. So suppose that this is your heart have the 4 different chamber. This is called right auricle. This is the right ventricle, and left auricle, left ventricle. So we know very well about that. So here first of all they have given the this is the RBC. This is the RBC cell. RBC cell present in the blood, and they have also the plasma. So means You know very well blood is made up of the two component, blood plasma and RBC. Now these RBC cells have the this is the pulmonary, we know very well, pulmonary artery, and these pulmonary artery have the much deoxygenated blood. Much deoxygenated blood means there is the PO2. PO2 is the very less. PO2 is the 40 mmHg, and PCO2 is the 45 mmHg. PCO2 is the 45 mmHg. When it will reach into the alveoli, so there is the gaseous exchange takes place, because this alveoli there is the gaseous exchange takes place. CO2 goes into the alveoli, and we know very well here alveoli PO2, partial pressure of the oxygen molecules very much, 104 mmHg, 104 mmHg. Clear? So that means you can say they have the 104 mmHg. So now listen, this is the right atrium. So you can say this is your right atrium, and this is your right atrium. Now blood pass through the means impure blood, deoxygenated blood. They have the much concentration of the CO2 and less concentration of the oxygen molecules. Means partial pressure of the oxygen molecules is the 40 mmHg, and partial pressure of the CO2 molecules is the 45 mmHg. Now here CO2 molecules, we know very well the exact information. Listen, so 70% transport in the form of bicarbonate ion, and 23% bind with the hemoglobin molecules. They bind with the hemoglobin means RBC, through the RBC, and 7% they dissolve in the blood plasma. This is the correct. And for the oxygen 97% bind with the hemoglobin molecules, and 3% dissolve in the blood plasma. So this is the transport of the gases you should to learn. Before I'm going to discuss, you should to make these two concepts. First is the hemoglobin. So hemoglobin 97% transport through the hemoglobin, oxygen molecules 97% transport bind with the hemoglobin molecules, and 3% present in the blood plasma. This is the first concept. Second concept about the CO2 transport. So CO2 transport 70% bind with the means CO2 70% transport in the form of CO2 70% transport in the form of bicarbonate ion, and 23% in the form of carba-aminohemoglobin we have to seen in the last slide, and 7% directly dissolved in the blood plasma. So this you should make the concept, because if you know, so that after that you can easily understand. Now this is the right atrium. Right atrium always carry right atrium. There is the always one artery arise, and this artery always carry the pure blood, where the concentration of the oxygen molecule is less, only 40 mmHg, and CO2 concentration of the CO2 molecules is there much. So CO2 concentration molecule is, you can say, 45 mmHg. So that's why this blood is the deoxygenated. When it will reach into the alveoli, so there is the gaseous exchange takes place. So CO2 concentration much in the pulmonary capillaries, what will happen? CO2 enters into the alveoli, and there is the oxygen concentration in the pulmonary capillaries is less. So oxygen will come from alveoli into the pulmonary capillaries. In this way gaseous exchange takes place, because pulmonary capillary they have the partial pressure of oxygen molecule into the 104 mmHg, 104 mmHg. So now this 104 mmHg, after that, so there is the gaseous exchange complete. Now the blood is become oxygenated. Oxygenated means there is the much concentration of the PO2. So PO2 now it will become 104 mmHg, and CO2 concentration, that is the PCO2, you can say 40 mmHg. So 40 mmHg. Now it will reach into the left atrium through the pulmonary veins, and after left atrium, so it will go into the left ventricle, and these left ventricle transport the oxygenated blood through the every part of the tissues or organs or cells. Now when it will reach into the tissues, so tissues we know very well, tissues also producing the CO2 molecule. Now what will happen? This CO2 further gaseous exchange takes place, and in this way you can say that is the transport of the gas takes place. from the tissue. So tissue generally producing, because we know tissue, there is the aerobic respiration is going on, there is the need of the oxygen molecules. Tissue have the oxygen concentration is the very less, PO2 is the 40, and in case of the capillaries there is the PO2 45. There is the gaseous exchange takes place, and oxygen will intake by the tissue, and they release the CO2 into the blood capillaries, that means from the superior and inferior vena cava, which will open into the right atrium. So this is the explanation about the transport of the gases. So I think everyone you are understanding. And now we will talk the next. There is the internal respiration. Internal respiration means in the tissue how changes, how exchange of the gases takes place. So here they again, it includes the respiratory processes. It includes the respiratory processes which takes place in the tissue cells. Where it takes place? It takes place in the tissue cells. Oxygen brought by the blood is given to the tissue cells as carbon dioxide from the tissue is passed into the blood. Means from the tissue CO2 will release, and this CO2 intake by the blood capillaries, and these blood capillaries provide to the oxygen tissue, because tissue I had already told they perform the aerobic respiration and they release the CO2 molecules. When the blood reaches the tissue, the cells, the unstable oxyhemoglobin breaks down to form the hemoglobin and oxygen molecules. Okay, so oxyhemoglobin, it breaks and form the hemoglobin and oxygen molecules. So now hemoglobin bind with the another oxygen molecules and enhance the ability to uptake the oxygen molecules. Clear? So this figure showing the binding of hemoglobin plus of 4 oxygen molecules. So when the high level, so there is the high oxygen molecules, low CO2 concentration, and it is only takes place. Okay. So now this is the internal respiration. Internal respiration. Okay, and I think you are everyone understanding. So okay, just wait 1 second. Yes. So here it have been. So now thank you for everyone your attention, and kindly share and subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon for regular updates, and thank you again.